In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create the box and base for the PhoneSafe project using parametric modelling. So we'll start with a new project, and it's always good practice to save at the beginning into a known location. So I'm going to go save, and in terms of the location, I'm going to put it into, I've made up a Tech 104 folder. You'll see also in there, I've got an ACU template for the working drawing that I've made myself as well. And I'll call it PhoneSafe tutorial. And we'll save it there. Okay, now before I start, I'm going to set up some parameters. So we go into modify, change parameters, and we're going to add some user parameters. So the first one, and we're going to sort of design this from the inside out. And the reason why we're going to design it from the inside out is because at the end of the day, what the PhoneSafe box has to do is hold a phone. So the first thing that you'll do some research or have your students research is the size of the phone that needs to go into the box. Then you need to consider how much extra space that you require to get your fingers in and to be able to get the phone out of the box. So they're the design considerations that will determine to some extent the size of the box. So I've already done a little bit of research for my phone, and I've come up with some parameters here. So yours might be slightly different. So the first one I want is inside length, and it'll be in millimeters. If that's not millimeters, change it. And I want 176. And I'm going to go again, and I want inside width. And that is going to be 90 millimeters. Now, in terms of the length, I haven't made the length much longer than the phone that's going to go in there because I don't want it sort of rattling around, but I have put in a little bit of extra space for the width because that's where my fingers are going to go. So they're my ergonomic considerations in my design here. Now we've got material thickness, and we're using standard 12mm thick radiata pine, so we'll enter that in. But there are some other standard thicknesses, so this just means that if you change the material, you can change it here and you don't actually have to change it all the way through the project. The other one I've got is the thickness of the base. And in this case, we're going to be using 3mm plywood. But again, you could use 4mm or 6mm or whatever. It just makes it easier to change it here rather than have to change it in the model. And finally, we've got the depth. And this is basically the width of the timber it's going to be ripped to. Now, in this case, it's going to be 44mm. So we'll just call it, it's the box depth, but it's really the width of the material. So that can be slightly confusing. 44mm, and I'm going to ask a question here for you to consider is why is it 44mm? The only hint I'm going to give you is the material that it's coming from, the board that it's coming from, which is 12mm thick, is 140mm wide. So think about why then, if you're taking it from a 140mm wide board, why is the width of the piece of timber that's going to make the box 44mm wide? We're going to start a new sketch. We're going to go off the top plane. And I want a center point rectangle. I like to work from the center. Go out. And you can already see there it's highlighting some boxes. So instead of putting in dimensions, I'm going to type in inside width. And then tab to go to the next one. Inside length. There we go. So I've now got that. The next thing we want to do is we're just going to create an offset, and we're going to go out this way, and we're going to go out. I'll just get rid of that. And it's material thickness. I'm just going to pan that across a little bit. Oh, it just disappeared. Let's go again. Enter, there we go. Okay, so the only other thing we need to do is just add in some lines for basically how it's going to go together in the real world. So we'll use the keyboard shortcut, the letter L. We'll go from there, out, there, out. Okay, so for now, we will finish that sketch. We'll come back to it later on because we're going to do a few more things off that sketch. But basically now what we want to do is start to create our components. So we're going to extrude. So keyboard shortcut is E. And I can select this guy here. We're going to go up and it's going to be depth. There we go. Now what we want over here in terms of an operation is we actually want this to be a new component. And we'll go OK. And you can see it's turned up over here. So I'm just going to now just be good practice and call it an end. There we go. Now you can see our sketch has disappeared. So we can just go back in here and turn our sketch back on because we're going to just make the rest of these components. So we'll go extrude again, go up. Now a shortcut again, instead of having to put it in, is we can just click on there and it, but we've got a little bit of a problem here. So we're just going to go back and we'll go again. So we can just go E for extrude. Now what we want over here is we want to change this to a new component over here and then now just click. Okay, you can see we've now got that, it hasn't joined these and turned it into one thing. So we'll go OK. So again, we'll be good, rename it and we'll just call it side. And let's go again. So E for extrude. Let's come down here, new component, click up here, OK, rename, and same again, E, new component, click on top, there we go. So we've got the basics of our box as it's going to appear in the real world. Now we will create the housing for the lid. In the real world, the housing will be cut by the teacher using a single pass on the table saw. So I'm just going to show you how it's modelled here. So we'll return back to our original sketch, but these components will get in the way, so we'll just hide them. Then we'll edit the sketch. And what we're going to do, we're going to use the offset tool again. And we'll select what we want to offset. So in this case, we want to create a cut through this piece here, through the side piece. And so it's going to be minus material thickness divided by 3. Now the reason why I divide it by 3 is generally when you're cutting a housing, you should cut it no less than 1/3 of the thickness of the material that it's going into and no more than about 1/2. That's a general rule. Okay, so let's do the same again on the other side. And we'll just go down and make sure, yep, so in this case it's now going to be a positive. So it's material thickness divided by 3. And finally, we're going to do it at the end here as on the end piece as well. So again, offset. And we'll finish that sketch. So there we go. Okay, so now we're going to cut our housing out of the 2 side pieces and the 1 end piece. Why do you think we're not cutting it out of this end piece here? Okay, so we're going to do an extrude and we're going to select the parts that we're going to extrude, but there's a few things that we've got to do here first. Okay, so firstly, the cut itself is going to be 3mm. Now I could have set up a parameter for this, but the 3mm is determined by 2 things. It's determined by the thickness of the saw blade, which happens to be 3.1mm. And in this case, we're using 3mm thick acrylic. So it's almost perfect. We need to go down, we actually need to go down. So it's a minus 3 millimeters. But before we sort of, finish this, we need it to be a cut. Now we're going to get an error here because there's nothing for it to cut into, so we better turn these back on. But also, finally what we need to do is we need to offset it. So we need to actually come up here and offset it. So we want our cut to be the depth of the material minus 5 millimeters. So we're going to set it 5 millimeters down from the top edge. And we have it as a cut and we go OK. So you can see the cut is there. Now this piece here, obviously we've got to do something with it because it should seem pretty obvious right now that we can't actually fit a lid on it. So again, what we're going to do is we're just going to select our extrude, select this surface, and we want it to come down. But what I want to do is I want to select that edge there, and so it's going to come down 8 millimeters. And again, that's a cut. The final thing that we'll do before we conclude this tutorial is just create a base. So we'll change our view and we'll extrude, and we'll just select everything that we want to extrude. So now that we've got a little bit of geometry down here, we're just going to make sure that we select everything, and we want to come down. So it's actually going to be a minus, and the parameter is base thickness. Now we don't want join, we just want a new component. OK, rename, base. Now if we go back to our home view, we can see now, or turn the sketch off, that we've basically created, apart from the lid, we've created our box. In the next tutorial, we'll create a lid, and then we'll move on to creating a simple working drawing.